Hi everyone, today we have another D&D inspired recording, but this one is actually going to be from one of my own games, and instead of being scenery, it will be a monster. To start out, I spent a bit trying to decide what pose I wanted it in. You can see I threw out that front pose pretty quickly and moved on to the side view instead. That was entirely because it's too hard to draw the front view for me, so I decided to go with something a little bit easier and more familiar. The base of it is kind of based off of like a dog or a wolf or something, so very similar shapes, but then I'm going to add in details to make it something different and much more like kind of a chimera beast, mix of different things. The front of it, I want to have this really raggedy fur, so I'm using kind of big textured brushes or strokes to make it look very fluffy. And then I'm adding in underneath that the arms and the stomach being kind of armored and scaled. So already it's kind of two things mixed together with a little bit of talons on the front, kind of almost like a dragon, and then the more normal wolfy pelt on the back, though the colors will be anything but normal by the time I'm done with this. So the snout and the face is going to stay pretty wolf-like as well, though with of course obscenely large tentacles and multiple eyes, since it is a fantasy beast, and it does not have to be terribly realistic. And then the back legs I'm going to do similar to the front, where it's kind of a little bit more dragon-like, kind of armored, well protected. For all of this, I'm trying to kind of get textures in there that are simple enough that I can do them quickly, but complicated enough to be interesting. So in particular, I put those scales on the back and then decided I didn't really like them and the time it would take to do proper scales was too much, so instead I added in this kind of rose pattern. I'm not entirely sure what it's supposed to be, but it looked pretty to me, so I decided to just go for it. I also ended up just going for kind of a standard rat tail, since I wanted it to be a little bit of a kind of a gross beast, and rat tails are the worst part of a rat. Rats are adorable, but their tails are just not adorable in the slightest. So we're going to give it a rat tail. Once I figured out what I want it to look like, I started putting colors in there, and I decided to adhere to Disney standards, so green and purple since it's an evil beast. When I showed this to my friend, he got very upset because it was not orange, and apparently orange is also necessary for an evil beast, so I've decided canonically it has orange blood. You just can't see it in the picture, of course. But it's there, and we know it's there. I could probably have gone through and just done an area select and then filled in the colors that way, but I had a couple holes in my outline and I didn't really want to go back and find them, so instead I just went and colored it by hand. Which one I do depends a lot on my mood. Sometimes coloring by hand is really zen, other times it's way too much time and effort. But this was a day when I kind of felt like it was zen and decided I was going to go for it. The colors are a little bit more muted than the traditional Disney purple and green. I thought about doing it really loud purple and green, but then it seemed a little bit too silly almost and not really dramatic enough. So I kind of toned it down a bit, restrained my more base me instincts, and went with this more muted version of the palette. I then added in some base shadows. I'm not going to do a very complicated shadow highlight job on this one, but I wanted to have enough in there that you can kind of tell what's foreground, what's background, see that the big muscly arm is standing up from the body, that sort of thing. So I started adjusting those in as well, and then also started working on getting the back legs to pop out from the front. For that, I kind of changed my mind midway through what color I wanted to shade in, and ended up just going to black, but that worked pretty well, so I think I like how it turned out. Also added a little bit on the tail just to kind of make it clear which way it's turning. And then, with that done, I did some highlights on the different parts of the scales just to make them kind of pop out a little bit and look distinct from each other. Same thing with I'm going to call it rose scales on the back. I'm not entirely sure what to call that, but it looks cool, so that's all that really matters. With all that done, I started moving on to just some little adjustments to the teeth and stuff, and working on making everything that should be shiny, shiny. So for those, I wanted it to kind of be jewel tone, super bright. I'm thinking maybe almost translucent claws. It's a little bit magical, a little bit outlandish fantasy. It's my desire for loud colors just peeking through a little bit at the edge of the drawing. So for those, I went through, did all the highlights, did a little bit of texture inside of them just to give them a bit more depth, and then that kind of helps them pop out a little bit better. With all that done, I realized it needed a home, so I started working on a background for it, kind of keeping to a little bit of this murky color palette since it's kind of a evil, vile beast, so I imagine it being in some sort of swampy type of place. So then I sketched in a few quick trees, gave it a little bit of a ground to stand on, and then started adding in color for all of that. The coloring again for this is pretty simplistic. I didn't want to make it too complicated because I think it would look weird with the more simple color palette and shading that I did on the beast itself. So it's pretty much just a base color, a highlight color, and then I'm going to add in a little bit for textures here in a hot second. Trees, of course, I cheated and used the Krita brush for the leaves. It is my very favorite brush. It does beautiful results and it's just so much easier than drawing leaves. So put those in, did a little bit of texture on the bark to make it just look more realistic. I realized I forgot to shade under the base, so I added that in as well. And then just did a little bit of texture on the ground as well so that it had just a little bit of that something extra to make it look more backgroundy. With all of that done, that is the end of it. I'm hoping this is going to be a good one to run in the campaign. We'll see how it goes. At very least it was fun drawing it, and I hope you all enjoyed it too. Bye now.